Hello and welcome or welcome back. My name is V and today we are talking about FF14 once again. Before I start this video, I should probably make a mandatory disclaimer and say that I do love this game and that I would not be recording videos talking about Final Fantasy XIV if I didn't love it dearly. But this time around, as I've also been playing some other MMORPGs and trying to figure out what it is that I feel is missing for me in FF14, I wanted to try and make a little bit of a productive feedback video and discuss some of the things that I've been noticing in other games that I think would really benefit in FF14. And some of these things the developers claim to be impossible, but as I'm not a game developer, I'm struggling to understand how exactly some of these features can't be put into FF14 as well. But regardless, I think that there are plenty of things that each MMORPG can learn from the other ones, so this time around I'd like to talk about my experience in FF14 and what I felt I've been missing since I came to 14 from World of Warcraft and other MMORPGs in general. If you're new here on the channel, make sure to subscribe, leave the video a like for some good luck. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, leave the video a like for some good luck, and let me know in the comments if you have some things that are missing for you in Final Fantasy XIV and what you would like to see as a feature in some time. If you happen to be new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, leave the video a like, and let me know what you've been missing in FF14, whether it's a feature that already exists in other MMORPGs or just something that you feel would improve the game. I'd like to open up with probably the biggest pet peeve for myself and so many others, and talk about the glamour system a little bit. Now, this is something that's been talked about over and over and over for years, and even the developers said that there is no good way to implement this kind of system and that they've already tried. But for the life of me, as a non-game dev, I don't understand why this is something that is so difficult to implement into a game, and it's just easier to have people collect actual physical items of the gear that they would like to get their transmog or glamour from. Even though World of Warcraft has so many flaws, I still think that they have an unprecedented glamour system, or transmog system as it's called in WoW, as all you need to do in WoW is acquire an item and you will automatically acquire the appearance as well. If this was a thing in Final Fantasy XIV, I think that many people would play the game for the sake of collecting different appearances, and imagine if this was put into the game, how many people would feel a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that all of the items they've ever collected were somehow just memorized and put into the game as their permanent glamour or transmog systems. I think that WoW still has the best one around, and I wish that FF14 would give at least a better bandage fixes if this is not something that's possible to be put into the game. We still don't have a lot of room when it comes to inventory for glamour. We put our gear and our appearances everywhere, including the retainers, which is still not a convenient way to use glamour, and some people just carry their items in their bags as well, which is terrible because bags should be used for the items that you actually benefit from. I feel like the community, when it comes to glamour, has been largely very forgiving, but it's just a feature that is very lackluster and it continues to disappoint, and a lot of people are choosing the games where they have a good, well-developed transmog or glamour system, and they're starting to feel like FF14 is just not putting enough effort into this feature. I think that there are many features in 14 that the developers are putting a massive amount of time into. Some are worth it, but some are not. And I think that if they chose to pay more attention to glamour and find a workaround around the old system and old software that FF14 is built in, I think that they would make a lot of players happy, because these have been the news that we've been waiting for years now. Another thing is housing, and up until recently I didn't really have a good example of what housing should look like, apart from playing Star Wars The Old Republic, where you can get a house as pretty much any player. It is yours, you don't need an active subscription to keep your house. But the problem with Star Wars The Old Republic is simply that not a lot of people play it. And it's just very difficult to use it as an example because of such a niche community that whenever you bring up Star Wars The Old Republic, people say something along the lines of, "Are you really comparing FF14 to that game?" But I actually do enjoy Star Wars The Old Republic greatly, and I think that even though I've only just started discovering the housing system in that game, is still better than the 14 housing system when it comes to availability and accessibility. Not to mention that World of Warcraft has recently announced that there will be housing in Azeroth as well, where you don't need an active subscription, don't need to go through any convoluted lottery or other systems to acquire the house. The houses are just going to be available for everyone, and it's going to pretty much work the similar way that it does in FF14. You'll have items, housing items, accessories, appearances, whatever you want to call them, that you will be using to decorate your house, and no one can take your house away. So I think this is great news, and I think that other MMORPGs are rapidly learning from FF14, but I also think that FF14 should be making an effort to learn from the other ones as well. I, as a longtime World of Warcraft player, cannot wait to have a house in Azeroth. And I do admit that I've been staying subscribed to FF14 largely because of the house for almost the entirety of the year, even when I don't play actively. And that just sucks. And even though our house is an FC house where the other members have their room and everything as well, I am starting to feel less and less inclined to actually stay subscribed and keep the house. First of all, because no one from our FC is currently playing the game. And second, I don't know if I'll forever want to keep this property if it means that I actually have to pay an in-game mortgage to keep the house. If I can have a house where I feel like I belong, I would much rather have a house in Azeroth where if I want to unsubscribe from World of Warcraft for a certain time and not play the game anymore, I would happily do that. Another thing where I believe FF14 could make some improvements is the map design. Even though FF14 is great when it comes to ether rights and teleporting, I still think that it has one of the most confusing and convoluted map designs that I have ever experienced in an MMORPG. Maybe it's just me and me not being very good at adjusting map settings, but every time I open the map, I can pretty much still see the corners of the map. I have to readjust it with the mouse cursor and choose where I want to click rather than just having a map of the area very clearly displayed and not feel like I'm looking at some old piece of parchment that is just escaping my view. Don't get me wrong, I do think that the Aetherite system is great, and the fact that it's connected to the map is awesome because that's just one other way that you can move through the game. But I'm still a very nostalgic person when it comes to World of Warcraft and Flight Masters. Flight Masters are one of my most favorite feature and a sort of downtime when I play WoW. I get on the Flight Master and I just kind of sit there, and even if I'm recording a video, it's a time for me to talk, look at the environment. If I'm streaming, I'm catching up with the chat, and it just feels good to be on the Flight Master or a griffin or a boat or whatever you want to call the type of transportation, because it actually makes me feel like I'm moving through the world. Now, because Eorzea and other worlds that are not Eorzea are not as connected as the world of Azeroth, with the exception of having to walk through portals to actually access some of the zones, this is not as possible, but FF14 actually does have a sort of Flight Master feature in the game, and that is chocobos. So this is something that a lot of players don't even know, but if you walk into a new city and you see an exclamation mark on the map that looks a little bit different than the other ones, it's kind of thinner and doesn't really stand out too much. It's normally a sign that there is a chocobo stable there, and you can use these chocobos to get from one city to another. It's just a feature that I have never even seen anyone use, and the fact that chocobos don't fly and they just kind of walk around is just something that isn't particularly lucrative and people just don't use it. I think it would have been a great feature if you could use this kind of system to fly from region to region, but we also know that FF14 is built different and that the zones are connected with loading screens, that it's not a huge giant world where you can just walk into a different zone, kind of like the way World of Warcraft is. So from that point of view, I understand why these flight masters are not a thing, but it still would be great to be able to traverse these zones through something that's a little bit more fun and not necessarily more convenient, but more immersive than flying on our own mounts. Some people might disagree with me and might see this as a very old feature that nobody uses anymore, but I think that there's still plenty of us who are incredibly nostalgic for Flight Masters and who love the feature, and I've personally missed this since day one of being in Eorzea, and I'm continuing to miss it. And every time I play Star Wars The Old Republic or World of Warcraft and I hop on a Flight Master and get to look around and see these beautiful, gorgeous regions, I just wish that something similar was present in FF14 as well. Now, the next thing is probably something that I should have opened with, but the greatest, most savage boss of FF14 still remains actually buying and downloading the game. I hate when I have to use the website, and I think that the fact that you have to go through so many weird loopholes to even purchase the game and then download the client and download the game itself and play it is what's stopping many people from actually enjoying the game. And even the fact that I sometimes log in to my account from a different computer or in a different location, and my account immediately gets locked out and I have to contact Square Enix from support, really doesn't help me feel welcome in Eorzea. And one could argue that all these systems are implemented for security measures, but it still doesn't feel good to have to be locked out of your account and have to change your password every single time you're either traveling and logging into a new IP from your laptop or logging into the game from somebody else's PC or something like that. I think I forgot just how difficult downloading and playing FF14 for the first time really is, and I'm currently in the process of trying to get myself into Final Fantasy XI, and the fact that there is a whole guide on the website itself on how to connect FF14 accounts and FF11, how to download, where to download, and what to do with it is just making me feel so anxious. I would love it if Square Enix actually wanted to sell the game in a more convenient way to people, because we just want to be able to spend money to play good games. And the fact that we can't do that with ease with FF14 still remains to this day one of the greatest issues in my opinion. Of course, if you choose to play through Steam or you're on your PlayStation, you're not really facing the same issues, but downloading the client through the website, logging in and figuring everything out remains one of the most difficult things ever. Blizzard has many flaws as a company, but if there's one thing that they can do right is they make you feel at home in their launcher and they actually sell the games properly. When you walk into the launcher, it's difficult not to get distracted by this or that, because they actually do a good job at advertising, giving community news and updates, patch updates, notes on this and that, and opening a launcher actually in a way makes me feel like I'm opening a newspaper. And this newspaper is full of ads that I actually want to see. It feels homely, it feels easy to use, very friendly, and I sort of wish there was a launcher where Square Enix would put Final Fantasy XIV, Final Fantasy XI, and any other game that would in any way be connected to Square Enix in this sort of way. I understand that building a whole launcher is not a very easy thing, but every time they release a benchmark for the new expansion, they prove that new launchers can be designed and made, and this would make it so much easier for all of us who are using actual launchers to play FF14 to play the game. Another thing that's very, very important for me is voice acting. I, for the life of me, don't understand why Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have more voice acting. I think that I would ask for too much if I expected side quests and people, NPCs around the map to actually talk to you. But some of the key moments, even in the MSQ, are just not voiced. I spend so much time reading the actual MSQ when I'm playing, it doesn't make me feel immersed most of the time because I forget what the characters actually sound like. And maybe I've just been spoiled by World of Warcraft, where when you approach the NPC in an open world, and regardless of whether you're in a main quest or not, they have something to say to you and normally have a voice dialogue even when they're not a part of the story whatsoever, and the full main story being completely voice acted. It does make me feel a bit spoiled, but at the end of the day, I think that big budget MMORPGs should invest in voice acting. At the end of the day, there is a lot of new talent out there and people who would be honored to be a part of a project like that. So many people would grab the opportunity to be at least a small part of FF14, even if it means that they're not actually earning a fortune. It's just very, very difficult to understand these decisions being made when you're playing your MSQ, which happens once in 2 years, and you just don't see some of your favorite characters like Eorzea or Tancred or the twins or someone like that just stood there without any voice lines. And yet we have Vuklamat in Dawntrail who just talks continuously. I feel like there is a disproportionate amount of dialogues for some characters in comparison to the other ones, whereas I feel like everyone should have a voice, and I don't think as MMORPG players we're asking for much. Another thing that I think FF14 would thrive in if they give it a shot is difficult dungeons. Dungeons continue to be a very underwhelming part of the end game, and apart from the daily roulette, MSQ dungeons or whatever else, you don't really get to enjoy dungeons on any sort of higher difficulty. We had this attempt with Criterion and Variant dungeons, but even the rewards for these and incentives were quite underwhelming. And I honestly think that Mythic Plus for World of Warcraft was one of the best things that was ever made. It keeps the game fresh, keeps the players engaged, and has even become a part of the competitive scene in World of Warcraft, which I think is amazing. Dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV, apart from going through them once for the sake of MSQ and then occasionally doing some roulettes to farm tones, don't really have a purpose, and that's just very sad because so much effort is being put into designing new and fresh ways to combat. And apart from, let's say, savage raiding or extreme trials or something like that, you don't really get to test your jobs on a high-end level, and I think that if they put more effort into the dungeons themselves, the players would have an incentive to stick around. And lastly, this is not something that's super important to many people, but for the love of God, put the chat bubbles into the game so that we can speak to people out in the open world and at least have the option to display their chats rather than using mods that are not allowed. Again, I'm not really a fan of making videos like this, but I've been playing other MMORPGs recently and I've been trying to find a reason why I don't feel so inclined to come back in Final Fantasy XIV, and these are some of the things that I truly miss, and I wanted to talk about them to hear whether you feel like some of these things are valid, maybe you miss some of them, or maybe you have some of your own ideas and things that you miss from other MMORPGs that you've ever played, and you would like to see them in FF14. Let me know in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, leave the video a like, and I will see you next time. Take care, and bye-bye.